I think that the second season of Mo, that is currently streaming on Netflix, is one of the cleverest, funniest, most important things that Netflix has put out. I enjoyed the first season. I thought it was very good. It was produced by Rami. It was written and created by Muhammad Amir. He's a stand-up comic in America. And it was the story of his Palestinian family who was seeking asylum in the United States. They lived in the United States. They got into the US. But it's been over 2 decades and they are yet to get their citizenship, green card, passports. It was essentially that story. And so the first season was an interesting and fascinating take on the plight of the asylum seeker, the immigrant in America, the person who is kind of trying to live the American dream, who's bought into everything that means, right? I have come from my war-torn country to the land of the free, but actually it's not that free, it's not that easy, and the American dream is always out of reach. Season 2 is something completely different. I mean, it's the same story, but it's something completely different because the actors and the writers strike forced Mo to change things up because by the time they got around to making this thing, October 7th had happened. And I think that the way he addresses being Palestinian in a world where Gaza is still being ripped apart by the Israelis is one of the most, just a cunning approach. I thought it was absolutely brilliant.
I, however, found the first season to be tonally less amusing than I found the second season. I loved the second season. And that's only because, for me, I found that because I had seen Mo's stand-up before I saw season 1, I wasn't as quickly wrapped up into it. Here I was expecting a comedy series about a Palestinian American, which is essentially what his stand-up is. In his stand-up, his jokes are about less about the Arab American experience and more about Arabs in America, right? We have our own insults. Our insults are better than your insults. And that's great. But when I saw the first season, especially the first half of the first season, I thought it was a bit tonally awkward. However, I thought season 2 was just a 10 out of 10. I think season 2's leaning into his Palestinian heritage, the lean into his real struggles to getting an American citizenship the proper way, the right way, trying to stay in the US the proper way, the right way, the way Republicans want good immigrants to come in, and showing the system to be, I don't know about flawed, but not as easy as people think it might be.
Well, I think the system is kind of flawed, even broken a little. It's definitely unfair, that's for sure. And it doesn't live up to the promise that America puts out there. And I'm talking about the original promise of America, not the Donald Trump promise of America, because that's new and different, and we have no idea where that's going to go. But I think the way Mo portrays America and his family's reaction to America is very, very real, because America is that bundle of contradictions in that it isn't perfect. The idea of American exceptionalism has been pushed from the days of Alexis de Tocqueville, but what it actually means has changed over the generations. And everyone who wants to go in or who lives in America has to deal with this contradiction. Is the American dream a real thing? Is it something that is actually achievable, or is it a lie that has been propagated by politicians to keep you hopeful and happy? And I think all of this stuff comes into play. And even when Mo tells his story and tells the story of these characters, they too are living that contradiction, and they are constantly at odds with the idea of America, except maybe one of his best friends who is completely bought into it, who has married a Texan blonde woman, loves guns and has guns everywhere in his house, and has decided that the only way to be America is to embrace all of its flaws as well. And it's hilarious. But yes, every character lives with that conflict.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't
Yeah.
seen a show that has done it as well as this, that isn't preachy about it or isn't rah-rah about it. And this is such a beautiful balance about what it means to be American and what it means to want to be American.
You know what I just figured out? And I could be way off base here, but Rami is your lead character's search for who he is internally.
Yes.
His place in the world with regards to his faith and his internal struggles. Mo is the opposite.
Because he is already American, but trying to consolidate the two parts of that identity.
Yes, whereas Mo is the opposite, right? Mo is an external discussion of what it means to be in a place. And I think the two of them together as a piece, these two shows rather, as a piece, is fantastic.
Just the way they address October 7th without addressing October 7th, in that I think it feels like Mo came to a decision to not take it on directly, but rather show Americans who Palestinians are. And I think that was the best way. Like, I think pieces of fiction like this are absolutely important in creating empathy. At the moment, there is a total lack of empathy for the Palestinian cause among certain groups of people. And I think it's because they've never met a Palestinian. They don't know who Palestinians are. They read stories about terrorist attacks, and that is all they know. They watch Fox News, maybe. But watching a show like this is a very nuanced and subversive way to get into your head. Remember, after 9/11, that was what all of the Muslim activist groups were saying. Hey, your neighbor's been a Muslim for the last 40 years, but you had no idea. You never asked him what his religion was, but now you think he's bad and he's evil because a group of 11 people blew up the Twin Towers, right?
Yeah.
And so I think fiction, books, movies, popular music went a long way to rehabilitating the Muslim image in America. But in this case, it's not a question of rehabilitation. It is a question of introduction. And I think Mo does a fantastic job in laying out the Palestinian people, their struggles, what they love, what they care about, and this idea that they're absolutely no different than the average American person. Like, he slips into his Texan accent sometimes when he wants to show people something, and he's like, oh man, I can just speak like an average American. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
Like, no one will know the difference. And it's very, very smart. It's very, very nuanced what he's doing.
And also, it's just a great show. It's not a comedy. It's not, laugh out loud comedy. But at the same time, this isn't a drama either. It's not a sad, weepy thing like This Is Us. It's not trying to tug at heartstrings here. There's talk of family. There's talk of history. I teared up when Mo was at the mosque and his cousin asks him to do the call to prayer.
Yeah, shit.
Oof. But also, like, I love how then Rami, as a producer, and Mo immediately cuts that moment with this old man walking in saying, what are you doing? You're early. You're not supposed... You still got minutes to go.
Was that the imam or just a random old guy?
I think it was just some random old guy.
Oh,
maybe.
I thought it was the imam of the mosque.
No, I don't know. It could be. I may have been wrong.
But it was just like, you're 10 minutes early. Of course the clock is 10 minutes early.
It was just that joke. But then immediately after that follows it up with you're so-and-so's son. He set up the speaker and the microphones here. He was the first one here who knew how to do electronics. And that roller coaster of emotion being so deftly written is beautiful. And it's the kind of thing where if you were unfamiliar with a group of people, and by a group of people I mean a specific religion or whatever, it's moments like that will endear you to that group, right? As an outsider, you sit there, you go, oh wait, despite the tenets of a religion, or rather despite the actions, right, despite the things you need to do, we all pray, we all believe, we all fight with our elders, we all have history with a place of religion, whatever, and none of it is different. And I think that moment really was a simple, beautiful way to remind people that.
In that final episode, it's an 8-episode season, in that final episode, they go to Palestine. And the entire episode takes place in Palestine. And I think it's just beautiful what they've done, because it is an episode about family. It's not an episode about the conflict. Yes, they talk about it and they show certain things, but for the most part, it highlights family. And I think Mo never loses sight of what this show is and the power that has to change the discourse, as opposed to giving a big monologue in protest, right? I think the whole show is an act of protest. And he does it so very well, because you have those Palestinian moments, you have those moments with Israelis that he shows you because it actually happens. But then there are also those moments where it's just about linguistics and semantics and arguments that people have regarding Israel and Palestine. His ex-girlfriend is dating an Israeli chef, which I thought was the perfect setup to do this story and show a moment of protest. It's great.
And even then, even in that situation between his ex-girlfriend and the ex-girlfriend's boyfriend, who is an Israeli chef, Mo doesn't come out of that smelling like roses.
No.
He's not in the right in that moment. You know what I mean? And I love that. I love that it's him losing control because he is feeling jealous, jilted, insecure, coupled with the whole Israeli-Palestine history that he is constantly carrying with him. So he was never going to come out of that on top. He was always going to be the bad guy there. And I love that Mo allowed his character to be that. It didn't become this always right, one-sided, preachy thing.
And we've been talking about how this show can change hearts and minds over in America, but I think it's actually an important watch for everyone here in Malaysia as well. We talk a lot about the cause, but how many of us have actually met an actual Palestinian? And how many of us are talking about the cause because of a tenuous relationship we might have with them because they too are Muslim and practice the same religion? And I think this show humanizes everyone involved, except maybe the Israelis, but you know what, fuck them. And I think that's really important. Because God knows the Malaysian government treats Palestinian refugees like shit as well. The Malaysian government talks a big talk, but when it comes down to it, we don't do nearly enough for Palestinian refugees. And so I think all of that's pretty important. And yeah, I love it when fiction does that. I mean, talking about a vehicle for empathy, this is it.
Because it's a vehicle of empathy. It is not a
sermon.
Not only is it not a sermon, but it's also not... When people ask us for recommendations about stories of the plight of Palestinians, they are expecting this 90-minute cry fest drama of human suffering, right? And just pain and watching characters' grandmothers die on camera. This isn't that. And I love that. For me, I feel like these things are not overly dramatic. Mo isn't an overly dramatic tearjerker meant to show you how they feel. It is a vehicle of empathy because it shows you how things really are, or how things are from Mo's point of view. He's not saying that this is what Gaza is like. He's not saying this is what the worst of the worst is like. But somehow it being not about the worst of the worst makes it a lot easier to consume, to take in, to have a discussion about.
I know it's only February, but this is already one of my favorite shows of 2025.
This is the one to beat at the moment, I think.
Same. I totally agree.
I think maybe the last 2 episodes, the last 3 like that Thanksgiving episode as well.
Fucking hell. The penultimate episode is a Thanksgiving episode. And just, here are a group of Palestinian Muslims celebrating the most American thing ever. Because, it's about family, it's about getting together. And I think that conflict exists, that contradiction exists in that episode, and it's done so well.
My favorite character arc is the white farm owner. The guy that owns the olive farm that Mo and his family sort of work the land on behalf of. They set up an olive oil press on this old white man's farm. And from the end of season 1, when he was open to the idea but stand off to these people as people, to season 2, when the farm owner is sweetly talking to Mo's mother about a horse and about his wife who's passed away. And I thought his journey was beautiful. His journey is the journey that a lot of sort of Midwestern Americans go through, right? It's that thing that you said earlier about how
he's the white surrogate for the audience.
Yes. But also, he's that guy that you were talking about earlier, right? Who pre 9/11 had lived with a neighbor who was Muslim for 40, 50 years. And then suddenly, despite his neighbor not having done anything post 9/11, the neighbor is the automatic villain.
Yes.
This is that guy that sort of comes down from that.
Season 2 is very different from Season 1. Season 1 was very much a dark-ish comedy about the logistics of living life as an asylum seeker or an undocumented immigrant. Season 2 is a lot heavier. It is funny, don't get us wrong, and the situations they find themselves in are hilarious, but it is something all the more darker and important and just really, really fucking brilliant. So do yourself a favor, go watch more. Season 1 and Season 2 are now streaming on Netflix. It's one of the best things the streamer has put out in years.
Also, Season 2 is the final season. There are no more episodes. So
Yes.
essentially, Mo runs for 16 episodes over 2 seasons, and it's fantastic.
Go check it out. Let us know what you think once you have. You can reach out on Instagram. We're at GogglerMY. You can also email us on podcast@goggler.my or send us a WhatsApp on the Goggler hotline, 012-524-5208. Thank you so much for listening. This is the Goggler Podcast.